Our guest today is a Canadian outfitter who's tracked bear by their saliva, survived the most epic storm in a tiny boat in subarctic temperatures. He is the host of Foodafield Podcast and also has started his YouTube channel, John Schneider's Wildlife. Without further ado, I'd love to welcome John Schneider to Bush Stories. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Ron from Standing with Archery. We're being joined by our guest today, John Schneider from the Foodafield Podcast. John, it is such a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
For those who don't know you, you got the most, like I just said just a second ago before we hit record, I love your Instagram. We'll get into this in a bit, but you're such an outdoorsman, fellow Canadian. You're from Alberta, right?
Yeah, that's right. Born and raised here. Yeah. North Central Alberta, just north of Edmonton.
Non-stop adventure.
Yeah, I guess so. Most people, I've got severe imposter syndrome on when people say that about me. So I try to keep life pretty interesting. We do a lot of interesting things around here.
Well, everything you're doing kind of reflects that. Obviously, you got a home life and everything like that. But, we're going to talk a lot about like traditional archery and that. But I'd love to know, because obviously, for those who can see it on YouTube and those who are just listening, you got a super kick-ass mount in the back of your room there. And you obviously got your bow gear set up. But how did you get started in hunting in general? And what led you into trad? Or really, what's the backstory to the journey?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, that's not a prop, actually. That's the way my room looks. It's I've been shooting my bow a little bit here and there, and I just have a Euro mount that I haven't mounted on the wall yet. And so that's where I lean my bow when I come in from shooting. And I've got packs and trunks set up that are still unpacked from the last trip that I was on. So anyways, that's the way my place or my room looks all of the time. But anyways, how I got started with traditional archery, it stemmed from something really simple, actually. It's just an innate desire to eat things that I harvested. I've been that way since I can remember, Ron. I've just always been interested in cooking food, and especially cooking wild food. So fish and small game was my start, grouse and rabbits and squirrels and things like that. Mom wouldn't let me have a gun in the house. So it just became, and this was back in the late 70s. So, compounds weren't a thing. Compounds for young kids especially weren't a thing. So, I had a green fiberglass, I think it was Ben Pearson, fiberglass recurve bow. And I was out in the bush, most of my memories of childhood are at the hockey arena or out in the bush, one or two places. Yeah. So I was just always been hunting and fishing crazy from the time I can remember. Yeah,
that's awesome. It's just see where you're at now. Obviously you only get such a timeline on Instagram, but if we can go back in time, I'm sure you have quite the history, especially where you are with terrain wise. Here in Canada, we're so blessed to have so much wilderness too. So
not much has changed, Ron. It's been, there's been waves of it here and there where I've done other things. I've gone and worked in the city and went away from hunting there for a few years when the kids were younger. But it's always gone in waves. And as a kid growing up, I was obsessed with it. It progressed into my teens when I started hunting deer. It really progressed hard in my 20s when I started wanting to do it professionally. So I was an outfitter and a guide up in the Northwest Territories, which for people that don't know, that's the Northwest Territories are an actual territory of Canada up in the Arctic. So I was at Frontier Fishing Lodge up there guiding lake trout fishing. And then I had my own outfitting company here down in Alberta. And I worked for other outfitters as well. So And then, got into writing. I've written, I don't know, I've written, I wouldn't say I've written a ton of articles for magazines, but I've, it just in dribs and drabs over the decades, it adds up. So I've written quite a few articles for national magazines over the years, mostly to do with traditional bow hunting, and hunted and befriended, who's now a good friend of mine, Donald Thomas Jr. And he was kind of the guy that got me really interested into writing, and published a few of my earlier works in the magazine that he was editing at the time, which is Traditional Bow Hunter magazine. And then now it's just sort of blossomed into what I'm doing now, which is the, whatever, I don't like the word content creator, but I guess that's what I do is I create podcasts and like you mentioned, thank you for the compliment on the Instagram feed. It's fun. It's always been fun to share what I do with people and try to inspire other people to join me, I guess is the bottom line.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, speaking of your podcast, and website for that matter, it's not just limited to just a podcast, but what was kind of the motivating factor to say, hey, I want to make this, more serious, take the next level, obviously create the domain name and start really getting into the podcasting aspect of it? Like, what was the deciding factor?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. Actually, I was asked that recently on another podcast, and that too has an early beginning. I remember as a kid being fascinated with the radio, so I always had the radio on. At the time, growing up as a young kid, I was really into hockey, and the Oilers were a big thing. I can remember when Gretzky signed here with the Edmonton Oilers in 1979, and so radio was a big part of my life. I actually remember as a kid. Me and my brother and sister would, sort of play, you're playing make believe, right? And I remember, pretending that I was a radio station, and I had like a little, I don't know what it was, a little record player, and we would use walkie talkies, right? And so they'd go upstairs and they'd be, they'd have their house upstairs, and I would broadcast my music channel to them and talk like a DJ. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'd kind of forgotten about that over the years. And then it hit me and I went, oh, that's where this comes from. So yeah, again, just another sort of passion. Yeah, I guess so. Not quite a passion, but you know what I mean? It's just, it was a way for me to do something creative in the field. And then it's been a struggle to figure out how to fit it in, right? Because there's so many people doing podcasts nowadays, and so I can just interview other people, or I can I can educate, or I can entertain, or I can do all of those things. So it's been a function of just trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. I'm still trying to this day. So
yeah, it's always like an evolution though, but that's awesome. The walkie-talkie story.
Yeah, that's where it all began. That's my podcasting career origin story. Yeah.
Keeping it old school.
yeah, I'll say, yeah. We actually have, I have 3 shows now that I'm doing, which is part of that evolution. That's a good word that you used, is an evolution. The Foodafield Podcast. Most people get that wrong. It's Foodafield. So a field is AFIELD. It's an old word. That show, I kind of struggle with a little bit because I don't know what it is. I have people ask me and I go, well, it's wild food ingredients and how to collect them. All right. Well, that's a broad encompassing sort of thing. And my whole life with regards to wild food is pretty broad. I mean, I primarily focus on traditional bow hunting, but I love fly fishing. I do some ice fishing. I've rifle hunted recently. Slowly starting to get into the foraging thing. But it's hard to, the saying in podcasting or content creation is that if you try to reach everybody, you'll end up reaching nobody. Yeah. And so what I've tried to do recently is, sorry, I've got the cat scratching at the window to come in. Here, let me deal with that, or she'll just drive me crazy. Get. There we go. Sorry, bud. Here, let me open the door for him now. Come on, Timmy. Sorry, Ron.
It's the beauty of editing software. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
Yeah. We live on the farm here, so we've got cats wheeling around in and out of the house at different times of day, and she's the old grandma cat. So when she needs in now, kind of thing. So I was talking about the show. So the Foodafield podcast, I've decided, is now going to be sort of an adventure series. It's just primarily going to be about entertainment. It has morphed into a sort of how-to show. So I'm trying to get people to understand the jargon and the things that you and I take for granted. When you and I are talking about traditional bow hunting, we know brace height, we know tiller, and we know all of these things, but there's people out there that just don't know that. So my show has taken a turn where I start to talk more simply, and I start to explain things to people that don't know what we're talking about. But that show will spin into more of a in the field. We're fly fishing maybe with somebody new. Here's what we're fishing for. Here's where we're fishing. And I get a lot of B-roll and sound of our adventure. And then I've launched another 2 shows. One is the Traditional Bow Hunter's Journey, which is probably the one that you're the most interested in. And that's in a partnership with Traditional Bow Hunter magazine. And that is just a collection of interviews with the industry leaders, the old timers, and the people that are the experts in traditional archery and traditional bow hunting, trying to almost capture their stories before it's too late. A lot of these guys, including me, are getting up there, and we're just not going to be around that much longer, right? So trying to collect those stories, and again with the angle of here's how you get started. But that's been interesting because I've been doing it for 40 some odd years now, and I can't believe how much I've learned from listening to these guys, things that I wouldn't have thought of, or, so even the experienced bow hunters will be able to get something out of that show. And then I've just launched a new one, which is called Unlock the Wild. And that's going to be a combination of things, but I have a premise and plan for it where there's still a lot of things. I'm 56 years old, and there's still a lot of things that I need to know how to do better, or I don't know how to do, or I hope that sort of process never ends. That's my wish for people in the outdoor world, is that you never stop struggling with things. And so that show will be, here's the problem I'm facing. Who do I talk to? Let's talk to Ron, and then we talk to Ron, and then I go out in the field and I put together the advice that Ron has given me about this topic, and I report to people in the field, whether it worked or not, more or less, right? So that'll be a neat project that I'm looking forward to. But
don't eat the bright green mushrooms. Don't eat them.
Exactly. The one that looks like a Christmas tree, don't eat it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. One thing I'd love to actually ask you, this is kind of a fun question, is that because I see you on the From the Wild web series, and that's a beautiful web series. For anyone who hasn't heard of it or checked it out, go see it. It's gorgeous. What's so beautifully shot. It looks amazing. But when I watch that, I start to think of the idea of, it puts you in a different light. And here's kind of a fun question I'd love to ask you specifically, is that it makes me think of the show Alone in a way, to some degree. When I saw you originally on Instagram, I was like, oh, this got to be perfect on Alone. If you were actually casted on Alone, let's just say you're one of the 10, you're going on Alone. Let's just say it was in your backyard in Alberta, you got the home turf advantage.
Yeah.
What gear would you bring? And what would your strategy be for making the 30 to 60 day, whatever it would be, making it to the end or as best as you can? What kind of gear would you bring in a situation like that? And what would your kind of strategy be overall?
I think it's going to be kind of an easy, boring answer for you. Is, I don't watch alone, so I've never seen the series. But as I understand it, you're allowed 10 items, correct?
10 survival items, yeah.
Right. So obviously, what I don't understand though is like a bow, one item, and then each arrow is an item.
Well, I think that's kind of like a one piece, one cohesive part of the package. So I guess they have 10 things strategically to use to survive, essentially, for 60 days or in some cases longer, or as long as you possibly can. And as someone who's in the bush enough as you are, it'd be interesting to see, like, what kind of thoughts would you have on how you would go about it in terms of survival?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. Number one, it would be my bow. Like, no question about that. I think that if I have to outlast 9 other people in the bush, then the advantage is going to be to the person that actually kills a big game animal and is then able to preserve it. So I would carry with me the knowledge of how to preserve meat, depending on the time of year. If it was, fall or late winter, well, then that's less of an issue. But just that ability to hunt. Like, so I Clay Hayes won. I don't know what season, right? But I was talking with Clay before he went on the show even. We were talking a bit about some of those things, and I was going to have him on the show, and I don't know what happened there, but then he went on alone, and now he's terribly popular with this, and it's difficult to get, any of his time, which I understand, so I haven't talked to him. But he won, right? Did he harvest an animal with his bow?
He got a young buck, I believe.
Okay, and then I'm also aware of another winner. And that actually would have been interesting. I do want to watch that season because they were up in the Arctic. They were on the eastern arm of Great Slave Lake. So I don't know what season that was. But the winner, he shot a moose, I know. So it seems to me like there might be this common thread of just kill something big and then prepare, like be able to preserve that meat, right? And then the other thing would be, of course, the ability to start a fire, but that's so sort of easy to do. So that, common sense would dictate, a flint and steel, I suppose, right? I don't know what else. An axe and a knife, of course. I don't know. I think that I've seen a lot of people that don't know how to hunt too. Right. And I encounter that. Maybe it's just me because I'm dealing in that sphere of people that are new to it. But, the mistakes I see people make are the same mistakes that I made when I was much younger. So I actually have been approached twice to be on the show alone. And I've said no twice so far. My mind might be changed if somebody were to ask me again, maybe. But I think it would the biggest problem with that would be being alone, number one. So mental state. Yeah. I think that you would have to be able to say goodbye to everybody that you know and be okay with that, because it might actually be goodbye. And it certainly is for a next period of months. So anybody that goes on that show has to be mentally prepared to just let go of everything that they know and love, and then be prepared to kill something big and be able to deal with it, right? I don't know. That seems maybe a little boring, right? Like to you and I, that's just common sense, right? But anyways, I don't know.
Pretty straightforward. Kill something.
Sorry, dude. That's boring radio. You had such a great question and I just butchered it by what are you talking about? Just kill a moose, dude, and you're done. Yeah. No, I don't know. You know what else? I suspect that you would need to know some plant biology, because I don't think, especially with, wild game, that's really lean meat, right? So you'd have to get some nutrition somehow, right?
Yeah.
So, exactly. I would know my teas, right? If I had access to water or melted snow, I would want to know what plants I could brew into tea, birch tea and Labrador tea. And I would want to know what cambium I'm able to eat, like inner bark from a tree. I'd want to know what, if it's in the winter, you're not going to have access to green plants. So yeah, that would be a big thing. Lots of knowledge on plants and nutrition would be huge, right?
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. I hear you.
Mushrooms, although there's not a lot of nutritional things to do with mushroom, but there could be some medicinal things. So.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't know. If there's a casting director watching or listening, John might consider it.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
That'd be awesome.
I always made a joke out of it whenever I've been asked, because I've said to them, I don't want to be the first contestant on Alone that dies on the show. So, so that usually shuts the conversation down. It's a pretty hard no when I say that. So yeah, who knows? It'd be fun to have that much money, I think, too, right? If you won.
And even an opportunity just to at least put to test what you have acquired, like knowledge-wise, and however far it does take you, hopefully all the way, if for whatever reason you go on the show. I mean, it's always good to know how far does the base of my knowledge reserve, and how far can it actually take me to live? How far can you go to stay alive? I mean, it's an interesting question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've thought about many times. It's like, what would I do in this scenario if I just left and walked up over that ridge? How would I live and things like that? So it is interesting. I think most of it's just sort of, there is a basic knowledge that I think, Indigenous peoples would have had through generational stories and knowledge that, we've lost, right? So I would certainly want to collect as much of that sort of knowledge as I could, because I think there's a lot of things. But other than that, it's just common sense. I've grown up on the farm my whole life too. So there's been a whole lot of ingenuity that's occurred around here with how to solve this problem or that problem without the right tools or without the right materials. You just have to fix it. And so that would be a good thing to know as well, right? So
sure.
Yeah. The other thing too that scares me about being on a show like that is just that if you're trying to make, you or I trying to make a brand for ourselves in some way, right? Like I know how those shows work, having been a little bit like a little taste of the industry. I know that they're like, you've been joking around with editing, right? There's ways to make people look really stupid, right?
Oh yeah, exactly.
So I don't like that. I don't quite like the idea of being completely out of control with how I look. So
you're supposed to cut me scratching my ass out.
Exactly. So I know that I would do something stupid and it would just be triply exposed to the world. Yeah, exactly. What about you? What would you bring?
Oh man. Well, I guess just studying the winners, seeing kind of what their best key items are. I mean, I think obviously bow is given for sure. I mean, it all depends on at that point what kind of head you want to put on. If you're going for small game, every strategy is that, or if you're feeling confident for big game, like obviously a couple big weighted broadheads for sure for the big boys. Snare wire. I don't know. It's obviously ferro rod. Warmth, shelter. It's just an axe can make a good shelter. You could be a digging tool and a cutting tool. So an axe would make a lot of sense. Multi-tool. My Leatherman is just like my best friend. Oh, yeah, man,
good point. Yeah.
I don't go anywhere without it. So it's on my hip at all times. So I don't know, I guess. And I'd like to say some good mil-spec paracord. I don't know. Like it all depends on where you're going. If you're allowed to know where you're going, but I think the core things can make anyone survive probably anywhere. I mean, it seems to be the same core items, and there's a survivor everywhere in the world with those items. So,
interesting. Yeah. It was. I forgot about the cord. That would be interesting too. I mean, of course, there's ways to make cordage without bringing in paracord, but I would think too that you'd want to stay not bored, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'd have to have projects in mind. You'd have to be making things all the time. Because if I got to be out there by myself for 90 days, or I don't know, what's the average length of time that it takes to win that thing? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd be like mapping out the area a lot. And I probably have like a little expedition journey, like point one, this is my point for today or whatever, that kind of be in the back of my head. So it's always mapping out the area so you know who knows what you discover.
You know what I found over the years too, is that if I spend a week hunting, and when I say a week, I mean like hunting a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the evening for 7 days, I'm going to kill something. Like that's just been average over the years. It might be the first day and it might be the seventh day, but or at least I'm going to get a chance. Like maybe I miss or maybe something goes wrong.
Yeah.
But it's not going to take too long before you can connect with something. I don't know if you've found the same thing, but even when I was outfitting, we told guys like, there's no guarantees when you're buying a hunt, but here's the one thing I can guarantee you. If you do what I'm telling you to do, and if you listen carefully and execute properly, you're going to get an opportunity. So, I don't know I think that would be just key, like to have if you are good at hunting, then you have a really good chance of surviving. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of hunting, the show's Bush Stories. John, it's time to hear your stories, my friend.
Good. Excellent. What stories can I tell you?
Well, I'm sure everyone's dying to know what your go-to campfire story would be. What would be the one that you tell around the campfire that the legend never dies? Like, this is the one that's like, they'll always be burnt in your mind.
Well, there's lots of those stories. Not all of them have to do with hunting. There's, it's so funny. I do have a lot of stories. Some of them are just outlandish and funny. I don't know. What do you want to hear? Do you want to hear something funny or do you want to hear something scary? What do you want to hear?
Ooh, something scary. That'd be cool.
Something scary. Okay, here's a good one. Here's a couple of good ones. I was outfitting bear hunts up in northern Alberta, and of course, inevitably over the years, you have bears that are hit suboptimally. And this one time, this bear was hit, and our policy was that we looked until we found the bear, and you didn't hunt until we found the bear, right. Which meant that you might not hunt for the rest of the week, because every day for the rest of the week, we're looking for this bear until we find it or don't. And very seldom did we not find it. But this one time it was a bad hit. It was a gut shot hit, and there was no blood, and we had all sort of split up. And we were miles back into the boreal forest. And this isn't a place in northern Alberta. Like, it's a sort of a fly-in place. There was a road, but there's like one road, and then the rest is just wide open wilderness. And so we were miles off of this path, and we had all split up. We were out of earshot of each other. There's basic sort of, you know how to get out by walking south. You're eventually going to hit the road. And, so we weren't like crazy lost out in the wilderness, but we were beyond earshot. And it got to the point where I had found the leaves were wet everywhere with morning dew. And it was late. It was, May. So it's spring. The fall leaves are still on the ground and they're wet with morning dew, well into the day. And when you're skinning a bear, the bear's saliva has a very distinct smell. And I just happened to look at this leaf and go, man, that leaf's wetter than normal. And I smelled it, and sure enough, it was bear saliva. And so, and it's hard to describe that you're in this vast wilderness that stretches for thousands of miles. Like, you could literally walk from where I was to the North Pole, and not hit any sort of civilization. And I'd found this saliva-covered leaf on the ground. And through sheer determination, like literally crawling on my hands and knees, I had followed this trail of smelling wet leaf after wet leaf. And I trailed this bear, and it came up over a little ridge and crawled up over the ridge, and the bear was right there, like maybe 15 feet over the ridge. And I kind of crawled up over the ridge, and here's a wounded bear staring at me. And it was a big old boar. He was a big boy and had no weapon, which maybe some people listening to this might think that's stupid, but, I don't know. It's just nothing we did. We didn't carry weapons with us. We've been around bears so much in baiting and hunting and tracking that it didn't even occur to me back then that you should carry a weapon. And I don't even think bear spray existed back then. So anyways, it was very scary to see this bear, and he just started waving his head back and forth at me. And, it's kind of one of those cartoon situations where I'm like, guys. He started panicking and eventually sort of backed out of my way. And we ended up getting that bear. I led the hunter to the spot where I was, and he ended up getting a shot and killing this bear eventually. So that I always sort of like that story because of just the tracking skills. I guess it was luck, but it was luck, but it was still that knowledge that you were talking about earlier, Ron, just that knowledge that you accumulate over the years. And
yeah, that's cool.
That was a little dangerous. The most dangerous time I ever had, though, the time when I thought I was going to die, was I was guiding on the eastern arm of Great Slave Lake. Great Slave Lake is the 11th largest body of water or fresh water on the planet. And it is it's like a small ocean. And in places like McLeod Bay is 2,000 feet deep, and you cannot see shore. When you're in the middle of McLeod Bay, you don't see land. And so we'd, not often, but every now and then we would go across McLeod Bay. It was about 30 miles, I want to say, to get to this one fishing spot that was notorious for huge lake trout. And so we didn't have sat radios. We didn't have weather forecasts of any kind. But this is just like the Wild West. And so we're in these 18-foot Illumarines with a 25-horse Merc and 3 adult men in them. So they don't go fast. But we're fishing, and I can see some dark clouds coming down the bay from a distance. And I'm like, guys, I think we should get out of here. And we were just catching, 30-pound lake trout after 30-pound lake trout. It was a brilliant day, and they didn't want to leave. And my mistake was I didn't get forceful with it. But of course, you don't quite know. And I'm like, we got to leave now or we're staying overnight. And they didn't want to do that. So just like one more fish. So we ended up spending 20 minutes more than we should have. And we made it about 3/4 of the way back across the bay to the other shoreline, and the storm hit. And I've never been a sailor. I've handled boats my whole life. So I kind of, I was good at that. But these were waves that were so large that when you went down into the trough, you could see nothing but wall of water on both sides of you. And so you're going, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 feet up and down, and then up and down. And the only way you knew where you were by the shadow that was falling from the sun, which was now going behind clouds, but there was still a slight shadow on the floor of the boat. So that's how I knew what direction I was going in, is by looking at the shadow that was on the floor of the boat. We didn't have cell phones or maps or anything back then. So the motor wouldn't have enough power to power up the face of the wave. So you had to go at it at an angle. So I'd go across the face of the wave, going up, 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 up. And then right as I was about to crest, I'd cut it and come down off the wave and boom, down into the trough. And then, just roar down the back face of the wave, hit the trough and cut it again, and then follow the trough and slowly inch my way up the next wave, and then boom, and just repeat over and over again until we covered the last 4 or 5 miles. And yeah, I was really certain that we were going to die. There was water coming over the sides of the boat, because they were breaking at the top of. Yeah, it was really scary. So that's about as scared as I've ever been. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that was a good day when I got back. So,
and you're here to tell the tale. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, lots of stories, different stories like that. Yeah.
What was your most memorable, specific trad hunt? Like you with the bow in your hand, and the one that you said, oh, damn, that was cool. That was the one.
There's been a few. And my first one was a doe that I was hunting on my grandpa and grandma's property. We lived on the farm right kitty corner to grandpa and grandma. So I spent a lot of time at their place because they had a marshland and woods. And didn't know any better. So I was hunting the same tree stand all fall. And just, of course, had deer that would go past me from time to time, but progressively they'd be further and further away from me because they figured out I was there. They were just working around me. But this one time, this doe was walking down the trail, and then she cut off the trail, which they had been doing because they knew. But she just made a mistake of being a little too close. And I thought, I'm going to take this shot. And I would just remember being just petrified, just shaking, because all of a sudden the realization hit that I was going to take the shot, and I lined up on her, and she came from behind a tree, and I came to full draw, and I released the arrow, and I just went blank. I don't remember the arrow being released. I don't remember seeing the arrow fly. I don't remember seeing the arrow hit the deer, nothing. It just, when you're new to hunting, there's that activity that happens at the shot where things go blank. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. And it was all of a sudden I just came out of my daze. Like I blinked 2 or 3 times and looked up, and the arrow was just kind of moving, and I had spined her, and she just dropped right on the spot. And I remember just having a flood of emotions, terror and joy and overwhelming sadness, and all of those emotions that we feel, especially when we've harvested something for the first time or killed something for the first time. Yeah. So I remember that very distinctly. I've had some other really cool, the first big buck I ever killed wasn't that big, but it was like a 140 class deer. And again at Nana and Papa's place, and I had grunted it in from maybe 100 yards away. It had come out into a little clearing 100 yards down, and I grunted, and every time he'd stop, I'd grunt again. This was when I was outfitting. So I just started outfitting, actually. So I knew more about what I was doing as far as trophy hunting. And this deer worked in and kind of worked in towards me, maybe 12 yards out in front of my tree, and was eating some clover in front and kind of looking around for what was making this sound. And I shot. And again, it was that blur of, what the hell just happened? And I shoot and nothing. I don't see my arrow. I don't see the deer just kind of jumps and looks around and then goes back to eating. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? I have no idea what happened. The arrow is gone. I shot the arrow. And then all of a sudden, it was I don't know, 15 seconds or something like that. You're in bewilderment, what just happened? And then all of a sudden the deer just started getting a little tipsy and just fell over. The arrow had gone, I guess, right between 2 ribs and on both sides, and was stuck in the ground on the other side.
Wow. Cool.
That was the best kill that I've ever had too. It was my first big buck, but it was also that deer had no clue that he was in danger until, he never had a clue he was in danger. The lights just went out. Yeah.
It's a great harvest then. I mean, clean, ethical, just as perfect as it can get.
Yeah, that was pretty good. So that was memorable as well.
That's awesome. Wow.
What about you? What's a memorable one for you, Ron?
Honestly, my very first time hunting turkey. I was so super excited. I really had no clue what to do. None of my family hunted. None of my family hunts, and my mom's native too. The thing about native people, at least with here, is that a lot of people don't hunt traditional at all. It's rifles, it's that type of knowledge. In all honesty, you talked about it, it's pretty much gone. I don't really know anyone who I could ask to teach me. So I'm self-taught, but turkey for sure. It's so I found a field that was adjacent to where I was living, and I don't want to say this on camera, but I will. I didn't necessarily have permission to be there, but I did it anyways. So it was a cedar. There was a cedar forest, and I was kind of I just figured I could just spot and stalk them all the way. They're maybe about 150 feet into the field, but there's still maybe 10 feet that shoulder, like saddle the forest. So I was able to creep literally 3 feet from them. I don't know how. They saw me. They didn't do anything. It was a tom and a hen. Yeah, I don't know how. They saw once the tom saw me, and I have my bare 45-pound recurve. I still have it. And why it's so memorable is that I was able to kind of like cluck the hen a little bit, and it gave me enough time to distract them. The thing that always makes it so memorable is I had a clean shot. It's just my shot window was kind of tight. There was a bit of branches there. I thought I could do it, but because I was still kind of new to it, I took the shot. I thought I was going to get him in the head, the tom in the head, and it just caught I don't know, some maple branch just that I couldn't see because I was so focused. I shouldn't see it, and I wasn't paying attention to anything but his head, and it just caught it, and that was just the thrill of being able to stalk the 3 feet was just, it stuck in my head so much that I don't know, it just ignited just like that you know, that I don't say native because everyone could be a hunter, but you know, it just ignited the hunter. So
yeah, I don't like saying native either. I have these discussions. There's some friend of mine that are, you know, in that realm as far as their careers go and stuff. And it's like, you know, we give credit to Indigenous people, as we should, of course, because they've lived a more traditional lifestyle more recently than, you know, I have, for instance, with my culture. But still, you go back far enough, we're all. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
it wasn't that long ago that we were all, you know, Indigenous, and we were all hunters, and we were all, you know, primeval or primitive, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it does come back. There is that instinct for sure.
I didn't harvest the bird that time, but just
came close.
Yeah, the memory of just how close, like that is possible. That's
and you hear that it isn't possible with turkeys, right? Like, you know, it's. I've never killed a turkey. The first year I've ever tried was this year, but I've just been told over and over again, like it's impossible to spot and stalk turkeys. And you're the second person I've heard do it. A friend of mine, Sean James, he's out from Ontario as well. He's been on my show 4 times now, and he was telling me the exact same story. Like he's touched. What did he say? He's touched deer, I think twice, like with his arrow. He's touched, I think, a bear, he said. He's snuck up to turkeys, including this year, like, you know, like 5 yards or something like that. Like, I don't know how you guys do it. That's next level. That's wizard stuff there.
You got become one with the woods.
I know. There is a thing. I know you're being funny, but there is a thing.
No,
there.
I did it this year. I was almost busted too by Tom, and like again, he was maybe like, I didn't take a shot. I couldn't take a shot. It was just a bad shot play. Where I was sitting, I got partially busted, but it just kind of. I told myself that I was rushed in. I just said, you know what? I am the tree. I was in a cedar boy. It was a perfect spot, but just the way he came in was wrong. But
interesting.
I just said, I just told myself, man, it's like, you know what? Because I had my decoy. I knew where I wanted him to go, and he was maybe like 10 feet from hitting it, but it's just, I was like, I am the tree, or whatever. I was like, he doesn't see me. I am this. And I just kind of relaxed. And then, you know, he kind of was going to go, but then I think he must have felt there was a threat of some kind, and he bailed. So.
Yeah, I've experienced that a few times with whitetails over the years, where I just, it's like you said, it's just a breath, and you just let go, right? And you lose your tension. And then it's pretty amazing what happens when you're able to do that.
The energy is what they pick up on, right? It's just the energy. Yeah. They're very sensitive to that stuff. So
yeah, and I think the trick to that is not caring about the outcome.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you know, I know that there are all sorts of thoughts that go through your head, like, oh, if I kill this buck, you know, he's coming in, and if I kill this buck, I'm going to be such a hero. Like, well, my friends are going to, like, my social media account's going to blow up. There's all these thoughts that are so weird and wrong, right? And if you just let go and you just go, I don't care. what happens here. This is really cool. What is happening? I'm close to this deer, and this is a huge buck. It happened to me with the last buck I killed. Like, I killed a really big whitetail 2 falls ago. And I remember that feeling. Just, I don't care. Like, if this thing is going to give me the shot, I'm going to take it and I'm going to kill it. And that's what happened. So yeah, it is funny. And the times that you're gripping, like the times, oh, I want this deer so bad. I've only got it, one more day to hunt, or I'm leaving on a trip. I got to make this happen. Those are the times that they never do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know that you're time sensitive for this particular meeting, but before we head off, I'd love to ask one more question. Mm-hmm. And that is, if you can go right back to the beginning, when you started picking up a stick bow, and you could give yourself the knowledge you have now, would there be anything you would change, or would there be any advice you would give to yourself to sort of steer yourself in the direction that you think would be best?
Oh, what a great question. You're going to have to give me a minute on that one. Is there anything I would change?
If you were to coach yourself?
Well, honestly, no. I've gone through a recent phase of thinking that everything I'm doing is wrong and I have to change everything. So I'm 50 years old, 53 years old at the time. And I'm like, oh, my shooting sucks and I suck and I can't shoot. And my traditional bow hunting career is over. And you're watching social media or YouTube videos, and these younger people are just crushing it. And you go, I could never shoot like that. And so I went through this phase of self-doubt, and I went to 3 under, and I went to a tab, and I went to, face walking and string walking, and none of that really helped or worked. Yeah. Because I didn't believe it, or it wasn't for me. And so my advice would be, there's no one way to do it. And I've had these conversations now a couple of times with old timers, even older than I am, that are in the traditional bow hunting sphere. And, you can have somebody tell you that you're doing it wrong, but all that matters is 2 things. 1, your accuracy, and 2, your penetration of the arrow. That's all that matters. Like, I don't care if you shoot it, behind your back. If you can hit what you're aiming at and the arrow flies straight out of your bow, then that you're going to be successful at bow hunting. So I think that the other thing that I might change going back is I would hang on to my bear takedown that I was gifted to me when I was an outfitter or a fishing guy. This guy had, known I was looking for a new bow, and he was a wealthy American guy. And he had said, well, I've got a bow here for you that I brought you. And it was a beautiful B-riser bear takedown. And I sold it a few years after that, right? Because it was too much like a compound, right? Yeah. And so that's the other thing that I would get rid of, I think, is this notion of gear. Like, again, it doesn't matter. There was a big sort of push back in the 80s and 90s away from, well, especially the 90s, even the early 2000s, I would say there was a big push away from technology with traditional bow hunting. So it was all primitive. It was all self bows. It was all heavy. You had to shoot 60 pounds. It was all, stay away from the magnesium risers. Those were crap. And now I see, so that's one thing that's changed is, these ILF riser bows and DAS bows, like, they're amazing bows. And so again, I would sort of coach myself that what you're shooting doesn't matter. It could be that little green fiberglass Ben Pearson. And again, as long as you're shooting it accurately and you got good penetration on animals with your arrows, then that's all that matters. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. What would you change?
Oh, I would start with a lighter poundage bow.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah, way lighter. I mean, I probably developed some bad habits that I probably still have now. I don't even notice, but like you said, it really, I guess in the end, it really doesn't matter, but I probably have bad habits where my shoulder from time to time, I'm feeling it. So I know I have something wrong, but
yeah, me too. Yeah, that's good. That's the obvious answer too, right? Is we were all pulling way too much weight back then. So, I see traditional archery going in a really good place because I see these big burly men shooting 45 pounds themselves. And that never used to be the way it was when I was younger. It was, if you weren't shooting 80 pounds or 75 pounds or things like that, then, what kind of man were you? So that sort of toxicity, I'm glad that's gone away. It's form, what is it? It's not form over function anymore. I mean, it kind of is, but it's, that's a weird thing to say, form over function. It is function. But yeah, lighter weight bows for sure are the way to go, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, I would 100% recommend that. For myself and for anyone else, just don't go crazy right away. I mean, all the bows in the world that you want to go crazy with are out there. You can get them. Start off low and slow, get that shot tight, get comfortable with shooting, and then they're out there to buy. So
there's no animal on the continent that you couldn't kill with a 50-pound recurve. I mean, maybe that's an overstatement. Moose, I would not hesitate to kill a moose with my 50-pound recurve. I'd kill a moose. Even like big Kodiak grizzly bear. Yeah. If I get the right shot, I'm going to kill that thing with that bow because my arrows are flying well and the broadheads are sharp and I can hit what I'm aiming at. So yeah, interesting conversation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, John, I really appreciate your time. I really am grateful that you took the time to do this. And before we sign off, I'd just love to give you the opportunity to just let everyone know where to find you.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Ron. That time went by fast. That was a fun conversation. People can find me over at the website, which is foodafieldpodcast.com. You can also hit me up over on Instagram, which again is Foodafield Podcast. But if you go to the website, it's got links to all the different social media stuff that we have. If you're looking for the podcast itself, all you have to do, you don't have to remember the names of the other shows. You just have to remember Foodafield. And if you go to any of the podcast platforms and search up Foodafield Podcast and you subscribe, then you will get introduced to the 3 different shows. They're all on one feed and they just come out on at different times, like different days. So yeah, you can listen to the ones that interest you and don't listen to the ones that don't.
Well, you got a ton of content, so I'm sure there's a ton of things that are interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I appreciate what you're doing too, and I wish you luck with this. It's fun to follow along on your journey as well, Ron.
Awesome. I really appreciate all the kind words.